They counted you out. Not because you were weak, but because you went quiet. They saw you fall once and decided that was the end of your story. They watched your silence and mistook it for giving up. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's how you survive. Sometimes it's how you rebuild. This isn't a story meant to hype you up. It's something more honest than that. It's a guide for putting yourself back together, slowly, deliberately. A manual for resurrection. Real comebacks don't announce themselves. They start in isolation. They grow in early mornings and late nights, when no one is watching, and no one is clapping. This audiobook will teach you how to rise without asking for permission, how to work without needing recognition, and how to return so disciplined, so focused, so undeniable, that your results explain everything for you. They counted you out. But that's where the greatest comeback always begins. Chapter 1. Accept that you fell. Sit with me for a moment. No noise. No rush. Just truth. This chapter begins with a sentence most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You fell. Not metaphorically. Not kind of. You fell in a way that changed something. In a way that cost you confidence, time, reputation, momentum, or belief in yourself. And here's the quiet truth. You cannot build a comeback while pretending you didn't lose. Denial delays dominance. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they never fully admit where they are. They talk around it. They explain it. They soften it. They rename it so it hurts less. But transformation doesn't start with comfort. It starts with accuracy. Face it. Own it. The move. That's the order. Anything else is noise. Before we go deeper, pause for a second. If this audiobook is already speaking to you, if something here feels real, support the channel right now. Subscribe so you don't lose access to work like this. Press like so this message reaches someone who needs it. And leave a comment, even one word, to mark that you're here, listening, and serious about change. Now let's continue. You don't need to punish yourself here. You don't need to dramatize it. You don't need to explain it to anyone. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Because every elite performer you admire, everyone, had a visible fall before their return. Not a quiet stumble. The fall. A season where nothing worked. A moment when excuses ran out. A point where the mirror became unavoidable. That's not weakness. That's the entry point. Face it. Own it. The move. Let me say this calmly so it lands. You are not behind because you fell. You are behind because part of you is still pretending you didn't. That's the key. People stay stuck not because they failed, but because they keep negotiating with the failure. They keep asking it to be softer, kinder, more understandable. But discipline doesn't negotiate. Discipline observes. Here's where I am. Here is what I did. Here is what it cost me. No emotion. No story. Just truth. You have a choice. You can keep editing the past so it hurts less. Or you can accept it fully so it loses power. You have a choice. Most people think acceptance means surrender. It doesn't. Acceptance is the moment you stop leaking energy. Think about it. How much of your energy is spent pretending you're okay with where you are? How much effort goes into appearing fine? How much mental space is consumed by quiet shame you never named? That constant background tension, that's what's draining you. Not the fall. The resistance to it. Face it. Own it. The move. When you accept the fall, something strange happens. You get your strength back. Because now your energy isn't split between reality and fantasy. Now you're standing on solid ground. You don't need their permission. Not from people who watched you fail. Not from people who doubted you. Not from people who left when things got hard. You don't need their permission to acknowledge the truth and rebuild. Most people wait for external validation before they accept reality. They want someone to say, "It wasn't your fault," or "You did your best," or "Anyone would have struggled." That comfort feels good, but it keeps you soft. You don't need their permission. You need clarity. And clarity begins with ownership. Not blame. Ownership. Blame looks outward. Ownership looks inward and asks one clean question. What part of this is mine? That question isn't meant to crush you. It's meant to free you. Because the moment you own your part, you regain control. You fell. Maybe you lacked discipline. Maybe you avoided discomfort. Maybe you chased approval instead of structure. Maybe you stopped showing up consistently when no one was watching. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Say that again, slowly. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has weak spots. That's human. But disciplined people don't waste time arguing with their flaws. They build systems around them. Undisciplined people build stories instead. And stories feel safer than structure. Face it. Own it. The move. Let me tell you something most motivational voices won't. You don't need to feel inspired to accept reality. You just need to be honest. Honesty is quieter than motivation, but it's stronger. Honesty doesn't rush you. It steadies you. And once you're steady, movement becomes inevitable. This is where many people get stuck. They accept the fall intellectually, but emotionally, they keep reliving it. They replay conversations, regret decisions, imagine alternate timelines. That's not acceptance. That's self-punishment disguised as reflection. Acceptance sounds like this. This happened. I see it clearly. I am no longer arguing with it. And then you stop rehearsing the past. That's discipline, not emotional suppression. Emotional completion. You have a choice. You can keep reopening the wound to prove you care. Or you can let it close so you can move forward. You have a choice. Elite performers don't romanticize their fall. They study it. They ask, where did my standard slip? Where did I stop doing the boring things consistently? Where did I replace structure with mood? Those answers aren't dramatic. They're practical. And that's why they work. Face it. Own it. The move. Notice how calm that feels when you say it without judgment. No yelling. No hype. Just direction. This chapter isn't asking you to feel powerful. It's asking you to become stable. Stability is the foundation of power. You don't rebuild from intensity. You rebuild from alignment. Alignment between who you are, where you are, and what you do next. That's the key. And here's the part that might surprise you. Once you fully accept the fall, you stop needing to prove anything. Not to your past self. Not to your critics. Not to the people who silently enjoyed watching you struggle. You don't need their permission. You don't need revenge energy. You don't need validation. You just need to return to disciplined action. Unemotional. Consistent. That's how real comebacks are built. Not with declarations. With decisions. One decision at a time. The decision to stop explaining. The decision to stop avoiding discomfort. The decision to stop pretending confidence comes before action. Confidence follows discipline. Boys, it's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Let that settle. Your fall did not define you, but your refusal to accept it will. And your willingness to face it calmly, that's where identity begins to shift. Not overnight. Not loudly. But permanently. Face it. Own it. The move. This chapter ends here for a reason. Because acceptance is not the finish line. It's the ground you stand on before everything else begins. You've stopped fighting the truth. You've stopped wasting energy denying what is. Now you're ready for the next step. You've accepted the fall. Now it's time to learn how silence becomes strength. Chapter 2. Stop explaining yourself. Lower your voice with me. Not out loud. Internally. Because this chapter begins where most people waste the most energy. Explaining. Explaining why it didn't work. Explaining what you meant. Explaining what you were about to do. Explaining your intentions instead of your outcomes. Explanations feel harmless. They're not. Explanations are emotional debt. Results are final currency. That's the truth most people learn too late. When you explain yourself, you're asking for understanding. When you produce results, you don't need it. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. Say it slowly. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. This chapter isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming grounded. Because the need to explain is rarely about clarity. It's about discomfort. People explain themselves when they feel judged, or misunderstood, or exposed. And here's the quiet realization most never reach. The moment you feel the urge to explain is the moment you've already given away your power. That's the key. You don't owe anyone a defense of your past. Not your failures. Not your delays. Not your detours. You don't need their permission to move forward without commentary. You have a choice. You can keep narrating your life to an invisible jury. Or you can step into silence and build something undeniable. You have a choice. Let's be honest about what explaining really is. It's an attempt to control how others see you. To soften the impact of disappointment. To protect an image. To be understood without having to change. But discipline doesn't speak in paragraphs. Discipline speaks in patterns. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. People who explain a lot usually do very little. People who do a lot rarely explain. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're occupied. Occupied with execution. Think about the strongest people you know. They don't announce their intentions. They don't defend their past. They don't argue with opinions. They move quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And eventually, their silence becomes heavy. That's the kind of weight you're building now. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. Here's where this gets uncomfortable. Most explanations aren't for other people. They're for you. They're a way to delay the discomfort of action. You explain why you haven't started. Why the timing wasn't right. Why circumstances were unfair. And every explanation buys you temporary relief. But it charges interest. That interest shows up as self-doubt. As confusion. As the feeling that you're always behind, even when you're busy. Explanations feel productive. They're not. They keep you mentally active while staying physically still. That's the trap. You have a choice. You can keep explaining your way out of discomfort, or you can let silence force you into action. You have a choice. Here's a practical rule to anchor this chapter. If you feel the urge to explain, ask yourself one question. Would a result make this explanation unnecessary? If the answer is yes, stop talking. That's discipline, not suppression, not avoidance. Alignment. Because once you accept that results speak louder than words, you stop wasting breath. You don't need their permission. Not from people who question your pace. Not from people who doubt your direction. Not from people who only show interest when you stumble. You don't need their permission to go quiet and rebuild. Silence is not weakness. Silence is focus. And focus is dangerous, in the best way. Most people confuse silence with hiding. It's not. Hiding avoids accountability. Silence embraces it. When you stop explaining, there's nowhere to hide. No excuses. No stories. No emotional cushioning. Just you and the work. That's the key. This is where discipline replaces confusion. Confusion thrives in conversation. Discipline thrives in execution. The less you talk, the clearer your actions become. And clarity compounds. Let me be direct here. You don't need to correct people's assumptions about you. If someone misunderstands your silence, let them. If someone doubts your progress, let them. If someone fills the gaps with their own story, let them. You're not here to manage perceptions. You're here to build reality. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. That line isn't aggressive. It's liberating. Because once you stop explaining, you reclaim time, mental space, emotional energy. You stop rehearsing conversations that never needed to happen. You stop carrying the weight of other people's opinions. And suddenly, momentum returns. Quietly. Naturally. Here's something subtle most people miss. The more you explain, the more you invite judgment. Explanation opens the door to debate. Silence closes it. When you explain your plans, people critique them. When you explain your failures, people dissect them. But when you simply move, they watch. And watching changes the dynamic. Watching creates respect. Not immediately, not loudly, but eventually. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline knows when to speak and when not to. And right now, your job isn't to be understood. Your job is to be effective. That shift alone will change how you carry yourself. Your posture, your energy, your presence. You stop reaching outward. You turn inward. And that's where control lives. You have a choice. You can keep explaining your intentions to people who don't execute. Or you can become someone whose results explain everything. You have a choice. This chapter is also about withdrawing emotionally from the past. Defending who you were keeps you tied to who you're trying to outgrow. You don't need to justify old decisions with new awareness. Growth doesn't apologize. Growth moves on. When someone brings up your past, you don't need to correct the record. You correct it with behavior. Consistency over time rewrites reputation. Silence accelerates that process. Because it removes friction. You stop fighting ghosts. You stop debating memories. You stop explaining context no one asked for. And all that saved energy goes into progress. This is where calm authority comes from. Not from dominance. Not from loud confidence. From restraint. From knowing when silence is the strongest response available. That's the key. You're not shrinking. You're consolidating. And consolidation always precedes expansion. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. Say it again, not as a command, but as a commitment. Silence your mouth. Let your work talk. This chapter isn't telling you to disappear. It's telling you to become undeniable. Undeniable people don't argue their worth. They demonstrate it. And demonstration takes time. Which is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. Because it removes the illusion of progress. Talking feels like movement. Explaining feels like effort. But discipline knows the difference between motion and momentum. You're building momentum now. Quietly. Patiently. Intentionally. And that brings us to the close of this chapter. You've accepted the fall. You've stopped defending it. You've withdrawn from explaining yourself. Now there's space. Silence. Structure. Focus. And that silence isn't empty. It's charged. You've stopped trying to be understood. Now it's time to learn how consistency becomes identity. Chapter 3. Cut off the old audience. Stay here with me. This chapter is quieter than the last. But it cuts deeper. Because some setbacks don't come from lack of effort. They come from the people still watching. A comeback fails if you keep performing for people who benefited from your weakness. Let that land. Not everyone wants you strong. Not everyone benefits when you grow. And not everyone deserves front row access to who you're becoming. That's the truth most people feel, but refuse to say. Not everyone deserves front row access. Say it slowly. Not everyone deserves front row access. This chapter is not about anger. It's not about blame. It's about boundaries. Because growth doesn't happen in front of an audience that claps for your old self. You have a choice. You can keep performing for people who expect you to stay the same. Or you can step out of you long enough to become someone new. You have a choice. Let's talk honestly about what an old audience really is. It's not just critics. It's not just enemies. Sometimes it's friends who laugh when you talk about discipline. Family members who get uncomfortable when you change. Social circles that reward stagnation because it keeps everyone equal. They don't need to sabotage you openly. They just need to normalize your weakness. That's the key. People who benefited from your old version don't need you disciplined. They need you predictable. Predictable enough to stay accessible. Predictable enough to stay relatable. Predictable enough to not outgrow the room. And when you start to change, they feel it before they understand it. So they joke. They question. They minimize. Not out of cruelty. Out of self-preservation. You don't need their permission. Not to grow. Not to withdraw. Not to protect your momentum. You don't need their permission to stop explaining your absence. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people only feel close to you when you're struggling. Your chaos made them feel stable. Your doubt made them feel confident. Your inconsistency made them feel disciplined by comparison. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline changes the social contract. When you stop complaining, some people lose their role. When you stop oversharing, some people feel shut out. When you stop asking for advice, some people feel irrelevant. That doesn't make them bad people, but it does mean they're not your audience anymore. Not everyone deserves front row access. This is where many comebacks quietly die. Not from lack of effort, but from divided loyalty. You want to change, but you also want to be accepted. You want discipline, but you also want to be understood. And those two desires often conflict. That's the key. You can't rebuild in front of people who remember the old version of you too clearly. They'll keep calling you back into character. Not intentionally, but consistently. A joke here. A reminder there. Remember when you used to, that pulls you backward. And every time you engage, you reinforce the old identity. You have a choice. You can keep attending rooms that reward who you were. Or you can step into solitude long enough to redefine who you are. You have a choice. Let's be practical now. This chapter is not telling you to cut people off dramatically. No speeches. No confrontations. No announcements. Discipline doesn't announce withdrawals. It simply stops showing up. You stop oversharing your plans. You stop explaining your routines. You stop seeking validation from familiar voices. You go quiet. Not to punish them. To protect yourself. Silence is not rejection. It's insulation. And insulation is necessary when you're rebuilding. Think of it like this. You wouldn't try to heal a wound while letting everyone touch it. Growth is the same. Not everyone deserves front row access. Friends who only connect through complaints will feel distant. Family who bonded with you through struggle may feel confused. Social circles built on comfort will feel threatened. Let them. You don't need their permission. You don't need to convince them you're changing. Consistency will do that. Or it won't. Either way, your job is not to manage their emotions. Your job is to build a life that doesn't require their approval. That's the key. And here's the part most people resist. Cutting off the old audience doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you stop performing for them. You stop tailoring your behavior to keep them comfortable. You stop shrinking your ambition to stay relatable. You stop dulling your discipline to avoid standing out. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. Because discipline is lonely at first. Not forever, but at the beginning. Because disciplined people naturally drift toward disciplined environments. But you can't reach new rooms if you refuse to leave old ones. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline changes who has access to you. And access is power. Who you allow close will shape your behavior more than motivation ever could. That's why this chapter matters. If you keep the same audience, you'll keep the same habits. If you keep the same conversations, you'll keep the same limits. Not everyone deserves front row access. Let me say something gently. Some people will accuse you of changing. They're right. But what they really mean is, you're no longer useful to the version of me that needed you small. That's not your problem. You have a choice. You can apologize for evolving. Or you can accept the temporary discomfort that comes with growth. You have a choice. This chapter is also about internal audiences. The imaginary people you still perform for in your head. The voices that say, don't get too serious. Don't be extreme. Don't think you're better than us. Those voices came from somewhere. Old rooms. Old relationships. Old versions of yourself. Cutting off the old audience means quieting those voices too. You stop rehearsing explanations. You stop preemptively justifying your discipline. You stop asking for permission that was never yours to give. You don't need their permission. And here's the calm truth. Once you remove the old audience, something opens up. Focus. Energy. You realize how much effort went into being available, being responsive, being relatable, being present in places that didn't nourish you. And with that energy back, discipline becomes easier. Not effortless, but cleaner. You're no longer pulled in 10 emotional directions. You move forward in one. That's the key. This chapter isn't about isolation forever. It's about selective presence. You choose who sees the process. You choose who hears the plans. You choose who gets access to the unfinished version of you. Because not everyone can hold that responsibly. Not everyone deserves front row access. Say it one more time. Not everyone deserves front row access. And that realization will change how you move through the world. You stop explaining. You stop defending. You stop performing. You start building. Quietly. Intentionally. With discipline. You've cut off the old audience. Now there's space. Space to develop without interruption. Space to fail privately. Space to succeed without commentary. And that space is powerful. Because identity doesn't change in public. It changes in repetition. In private, you've stopped performing for who you were. Now it's time to learn how repetition forges identity. Chapter 4, Build in Isolation. Come closer. This chapter is meant to be heard in quiet, late at night, when the world has stopped asking things from you. Because what you're about to learn doesn't grow well under lights. Every great return is constructed away from applause and validation. Not in public. Not in conversation. Not in moments that feel impressive. In isolation. And let me say this clearly before your mind resists it. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. Say it with me, slowly. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. Most people misunderstand this phase. They think something has gone wrong when life gets quiet. They assume they're being punished, left out, forgotten. They're not. They're being given space. Space to build without interruption. Space to fail without witnesses. Space to become without explanation. That's the key. You don't rise in isolation. You prepare there. And preparation never looks impressive from the outside. It looks boring, repetitive, unremarkable, which is why most people avoid it. You have a choice. You can chase noise and stay the same, or you can accept isolation and change quietly. You have a choice. Let's be honest about what isolation really feels like. It feels slow. It feels unseen. It feels like nothing is happening. That's the illusion. In reality, everything is happening. Your nervous system is stabilizing. Your habits are forming. Your identity is recalibrating. But there's no applause for that. And that's exactly why it works. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. In isolation, no one is impressed by your intentions. No one rewards your potential. No one comforts you when motivation fades. Only discipline remains. And discipline doesn't need company. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. When you remove stimulation, excuses get loud. When you remove distraction, resistance shows itself. That's not a sign to quit. That's the work. Most people try to grow while staying entertained, while staying connected, while staying visible. But visibility feeds ego. Isolation feeds structure. That's the key. In isolation, you stop performing. You stop narrating. You stop proving. You just do the work. Again, and again, and again. Boring, silent, consistent. And slowly, something shifts. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "Is this what I do now?" That's how identity is built. You don't need their permission. Not to disappear for a while. Not to stop responding immediately. Not to prioritize structure over social approval. You don't need their permission to go quiet and get serious. Let me be practical with you. Isolation doesn't mean cutting off the world completely. It means controlling inputs. You choose when to engage. You choose what you consume. You choose where your attention goes. And most importantly, you choose repetition over stimulation. That's the key. In isolation, your days look simple. Wake up, do the work, train the body, train the mind. Repeat. No dramatic breakthroughs. No emotional highs. Just progress accumulating quietly. And this is where confusion dies. Because confusion thrives on too many voices. Too many opinions. Too many comparisons. Isolation strips that away. You're left with one question each day. Did I do what I said I would do? That's it. And when the answer is yes, confidence grows. Not loud confidence. Stable confidence. The kind that doesn't need reinforcement. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. Say it again. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. This phase will test you in subtle ways. You'll wonder if you're falling behind, if others are moving faster, if you should be sharing more, showing more, explaining more. That's when you return to discipline. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline doesn't ask, "Am I seen?" It asks, "Am I consistent?" And consistency compounds in silence. You have a choice. You can break isolation early for comfort, or you can stay long enough for transformation. You have a choice. Most people leave isolation too soon. They get uncomfortable. They crave feedback. They want reassurance that this is working. But preparation doesn't reassure you. It tests your patience. And patience is a form of strength most people never develop. Here's something important to understand. Isolation will surface everything you've been avoiding. Old doubts, old fears, old habits that used to be masked by noise. That's not a setback. That's access. Access to the real work. When there's no one watching, you see yourself clearly. And clarity changes behavior. You start noticing patterns. When you procrastinate, when you self-sabotage, When you reach for distraction instead of action. And instead of judging yourself, you correct. Quietly. That's discipline. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Effective. You don't need their permission. Not to rebuild slowly. Not to choose boredom over burnout. Not to prioritize depth over speed. Isolation is where shallow ambition dies. And what replaces it is dangerous. Resolve. Resolve doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post updates. It doesn't seek validation. It just shows up, day after day. And eventually, isolation becomes familiar, comfortable. Not because it's easy, but because it's honest. No pretending, no performing, just effort meeting structure. That's the key. You start to realize something profound. You don't need motivation to keep going. You need rhythm. Isolation gives you rhythm. Same time, same place, same actions. And rhythm creates momentum without emotion. That's how professionals operate. Not on feeling, on systems. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline doesn't care if today feels meaningful. It cares if today was completed. And completed days stack. Quietly. Until one day you look back and realize, you're not the same person anymore. Not because you decided to be, but because you repeated something long enough for it to stick. Isolation is not loneliness. It's preparation. This chapter is asking you to trust the quiet, to stop rushing the reveal, to stop checking the mirror every day. Preparation is invisible by design, and that invisibility protects you. It protects the process from opinions. It protects your focus from comparison. It protects your identity while it's still forming. You have a choice. You can treat isolation as a punishment, or you can treat it as a training ground. You have a choice. And if you choose the training ground, you'll start to feel something new. Not excitement, not hype. Stability. And stability is the foundation of power. Because when you're stable, you're not easily pulled off course. No praise inflates you. No criticism derails you. You move forward at your pace. Unbothered. That's the key. This is where real comebacks are made. Not in public redemption arcs, but in private repetition. When no one is watching. When no one is clapping. When no one knows how hard it is. Isolation is where you earn the right to be seen later. And when the time comes, you won't need to announce your return. Your presence will explain it. You've stopped performing. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped seeking approval. You're building. Quietly. Patiently. With discipline. And that brings us to the close of this chapter. You're no longer afraid of being unseen. You understand the value of preparation. Now it's time to learn how repetition turns effort into identity. Chapter 5. Discipline replaces motivation. Stay with me. This chapter is where many people quietly give up. Not because it's hard, but because it's honest. Because here's the truth you don't hear often enough. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is mechanical. And anything emotional will eventually abandon you. Motivation rises. Motivation falls. Motivation depends on mood, sleep, praise, hope. Discipline doesn't. Discipline shows up. That's the key. If you've been waiting to feel ready, if you've been waiting to feel inspired, if you've been waiting for the fire to come back, this chapter is where you stop waiting. Because waiting is what keeps people average. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. Say it slowly. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. This isn't aggression. It's maturity. Most people build their lives on motivation. And most people stay inconsistent. Because motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. Motivation knocks when it feels like it. Discipline has a key. That's the difference. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You have a choice. You can keep asking, do I feel like it today? Or you can decide, this is what I do regardless. You have a choice. Let's be clear about something important. This chapter is not telling you to ignore how you feel. It's telling you to stop letting feelings decide. Feelings are data, not commands. They inform you. They don't lead you. And when feelings lead, discipline disappears. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. People don't fail because they lack passion. They fail because they rely on it. Passion burns hot, and then it burns out. Discipline burns low, steady, relentless. And that's what carries you forward when nothing feels exciting anymore. Because there will be days like that. Days when progress feels invisible. Days when effort feels pointless. Days when quitting feels reasonable. That's where this chapter lives. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. Most people believe discipline is heroic. It's not. It's boring. It's waking up and doing the same thing again. It's following the plan even when you don't believe in it today. It's showing up without enthusiasm. And that's why it works. Because boredom doesn't scare disciplined people. They expect it. They've already decided. That's the key. Once you remove motivation from the equation, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with yourself. No more inner debates. No more, maybe later. No more emotional bargaining. The decision is already made. And when decisions are made once instead of daily, energy is freed. You don't waste it deciding. You use it doing. You don't need their permission. Not to work without excitement. Not to progress quietly. Not to commit without applause. You don't need their permission to be consistent instead of inspired. Let me give you something practical, something real. From this point forward, stop asking, how motivated am I today? And start asking, what's the minimum version of this I will complete today? That question changes everything. Because discipline doesn't demand perfection. It demands completion. Minimum effort, done consistently, beats maximum effort done emotionally. Every time. That's the key. This is where self-doubt begins to dissolve. Not because you feel confident, but because you keep promises to yourself. And self-trust is built mechanically. One action. Repeated. When you say you'll do something, and you do it, your mind starts to believe you again. That belief doesn't come from hype. It comes from evidence. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. This phrase isn't cruel. It's freeing. Because it removes pressure. You no longer need to be on. You no longer need to feel strong. You no longer need the right mood. You just need to execute. And execution doesn't require emotion. It requires structure. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Most people think discipline limits freedom. It does the opposite. Discipline removes chaos. Chaos is exhausting. Indecision is exhausting. Depending on feelings is exhausting. Discipline simplifies life. Same time. Same task. Same standard. Over time, effort becomes automatic. And automatic effort is power. You have a choice. You can keep riding emotional waves. Or you can build something that doesn't depend on them. You have a choice. This chapter is also about letting go of inspiration culture. The constant search for the next quote. The next video. The next push. Those things feel helpful, but they keep you dependent. Dependent on external fuel. Discipline is internal. Once it's built, it doesn't need topping up. It just runs. Quietly. Reliably. That's the key. Here's something most people don't want to hear, but need to. If you only work when you feel good, you train yourself to quit when you don't. If you only show up inspired, you train yourself to disappear under pressure. Discipline trains the opposite. It trains neutrality. You work whether today feels good or bad, important or meaningless, heavy or light. And that neutrality creates stability. Stability creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. Say it again, not as a command, but as an identity. Do it tired. Do it bored. Do it anyway. This is where weakness is replaced. Not with bravado, but with reliability. You become someone who can be counted on. By others, but more importantly by yourself. That's the deepest shift. When you trust yourself, fear loses leverage. Self-doubt quiets down. Not because you argued with it, but because you outworked it. That's the key. This chapter doesn't promise excitement. It promises progress. And progress changes how you see yourself. You stop saying, "I'm trying." You start saying nothing and doing more. You stop needing motivation because you've built a machine. And machines don't need to feel like running. They just do. You don't need their permission. Not to stop chasing inspiration. Not to work without praise. Not to choose discipline over drama. And here's the calm truth that ends this chapter. Once discipline replaces motivation, you become dangerous to your old limits. Because nothing external controls you anymore. Not mood. Not opinion. Not energy levels. You move because it's time to move. You act because it's what you do. You've stopped waiting to feel ready. You've started acting ready. And that changes everything. You no longer ask for motivation. You build momentum. You no longer depend on emotion. You rely on structure. You no longer hope for change. You execute it. That's the key. You've learned how discipline replaces motivation. Now it's time to learn what happens when discipline faces resistance. Chapter 6. Become predictable to yourself. Stay still for a moment. Let the noise fade. Because this chapter is about something most people misunderstand and quietly resist. Predictability. The strongest people are boring in their routines and violent in their execution. Not chaotic. Not impulsive. Not emotionally driven. Predictable. And that predictability is not weakness. It's power. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. Say it slowly. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. This chapter is where identity stops being an idea and starts becoming behavior. Because here's the truth most people don't want to accept. You don't rise to who you want to be. You fall to what you repeat. That's the key. Most people live unpredictable lives. They wake up unsure. They work when they feel like it. They rest when they're overwhelmed. They push when guilt kicks in. Their effort depends on emotion. And emotion is unstable. Discipline is not. You have a choice. You can keep letting your days be decided by mood. Or you can decide once and repeat forever. You have a choice. Becoming predictable to yourself means one thing. You can trust your own behavior. And that trust changes everything. Think about how exhausting it is not to trust yourself. Not knowing if you'll follow through. Not knowing if today is a good day or a bad day. Not knowing which version of you will show up. That uncertainty breeds anxiety. Discipline removes it. When your behavior is predictable, your mind relaxes. Because there's no debate. The work gets done. The routine runs. The standard holds. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. This chapter is not about becoming robotic. It's about becoming reliable. Reliable to yourself. Because once you're reliable, self-doubt loses its voice. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" Because you already know the answer. You've proven it. Yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. That's the key. Predictability is how confidence is built. Not confidence that talks. Confidence that acts. Quietly. You don't need their permission. Not to live a repetitive life. Not to simplify your days. Not to choose structure over excitement. You don't need their permission to be boring. Because boring routines create extraordinary outcomes. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think discipline should feel intense, aggressive, heroic. It shouldn't. Discipline should feel normal, automatic. So normal that skipping it feels strange. That's when you've crossed the line from effort to identity. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Your flaws don't disappear when you become disciplined. They just stop running the schedule. Predictable habits put flaws in their place. You don't argue with laziness. You out-repeat it. You don't fight inconsistency. You starve it. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. Let's talk practically. Predictability starts with removing choice. Not big choices. Small ones. You don't decide if you train. You decide when. You don't decide if you work. You decide how much, minimum, every day. You don't decide if you show discipline. You decide that discipline is the default. And once it's the default, emotion becomes irrelevant. That's the key. Most people want freedom before structure. But structure creates freedom. Freedom from indecision. Freedom from self-loathing. Freedom from constantly starting over. When your habits are predictable, your progress is inevitable. You have a choice. You can keep resetting your life every Monday. Or you can build something that doesn't reset. You have a choice. This chapter also confronts something uncomfortable. Predictable people are often misunderstood. They're called boring, obsessive, rigid. Let them talk. You don't need their permission. Not to live simply. Not to repeat what works. Not to protect your energy. People who mock routine usually lack one. And people without routine stay emotional. Predictability creates emotional stability. Because when your actions are stable, your feelings settle. That's the key. Here's something subtle but powerful. When you're predictable to yourself, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need to talk yourself into effort. You just start. And starting becomes automatic. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. This is how discipline becomes identity. Not through declarations. Through repetition. You stop saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined." You just live in a disciplined way. And eventually, you forget there was ever another option. That's when confusion dies. Confusion comes from too many choices. Too many exceptions. Too many just this once moments. Predictability removes that. There is no just this once. There is just the standard. And standards don't negotiate. That's the key. You have a choice. You can keep treating discipline like a mood. Or you can treat it like gravity. Always there. Always on. This chapter is also about self-respect. People think self-respect comes from confidence. It doesn't. It comes from consistency. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, self-respect grows. Every time you break one, it erodes. Predictability protects self-respect. Because promises become behavior, not intention. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline is how you prove to yourself that you matter, that your goals matter, that your future matters. And once you feel that internally, you stop seeking validation externally. You don't need their permission. Not to live quietly. Not to repeat yourself. Not to stay committed when no one is watching. Predictable people don't need applause. They need momentum. And momentum loves routine. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. Let me say this calmly so it lands. You are not meant to be exciting every day. You are meant to be effective. Effectiveness doesn't look good on social media, but it builds real power. And real power doesn't announce itself. It shows up, predictable, prepared, unshaken. That's the key. When life gets chaotic, and it will, predictability becomes your anchor. When emotions spike, routine holds. When motivation drops, habit carries you. When doubt creeps in, repetition answers it. Not with words, with proof. You've done this before. You'll do it again, because that's who you are now. Same habits, same standards. Every day. This is where the strongest people are forged. Not in intensity, but in inevitability. Their success feels unavoidable, because it is. Built on predictable behavior. You've stopped relying on emotion. You've stopped negotiating with yourself. You've stopped hoping consistency will appear. You've built it. Quietly. Deliberately. Mechanically. And that brings us to the close of this chapter. You are becoming someone you can count on. Not occasionally. Not when it's easy. Every day. You've learned how predictability builds identity. Now it's time to learn what happens when discipline is tested by pressure. Chapter 7. Train your nervous system for pressure. Stay with me. This chapter isn't loud. It's steady. Because what breaks most people isn't difficulty. It's discomfort. Not pain. Not effort. Not challenge. Discomfort. The kind that tightens your chest. The kind that speeds your thoughts. The kind that makes quitting feel urgent and logical. And here's the truth most people never learn. Pressure doesn't destroy discipline. An untrained nervous system does. That's the key. Calm is a weapon. Say it slowly. Calm is a weapon. This chapter is about learning how to stay regulated when everything in you wants to escape. Because life doesn't test your strength first. It tests your nervous system. When pressure hits, your body reacts before your mind does. Heart rate rises. Breathing shortens. Thoughts scatter. And if you've never trained for that moment, you confuse discomfort with danger. So you quit. You react. You self-sabotage. Not because you're weak, because you're untrained. You have a choice. You can keep avoiding pressure and stay fragile. Or you can train yourself to stay calm inside it. You have a choice. Calm is a weapon. Let's talk about public failure. Standing exposed. Mistakes visible. Eyes on you. Most people don't fear failure. They fear the physical sensation that comes with it. The heat. The shame. The rush. Their nervous system panics and demands relief. So they explain. They retreat. They disappear. Not because they lack discipline. Because they lack regulation. That's the key. Discipline lives in the body first, not the mind. If your body interprets pressure as threat, discipline collapses. So this chapter isn't about being tougher. It's about training calm under stress. Calm is a weapon. Consider rejection. A message left unanswered. An application denied. A door closed without explanation. What hurts isn't the rejection itself. It's the spike. The sudden drop in certainty. The surge of self-doubt. The urge to pull back and protect your ego. Most people stop not because rejection proves anything, but because their nervous system can't tolerate uncertainty. So they avoid it. They stop trying. They lower standards. They choose comfort over growth. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline requires nervous system capacity. You don't need their permission. Not to feel uncomfortable. Not to be misunderstood. Not to sit inside uncertainty without reacting. You don't need their permission to stay calm while things are unresolved. Calm is a weapon. Let's talk about long-term uncertainty. The kind with no timeline, no guarantee, no visible payoff. This is where most people slowly quit. Not dramatically, quietly. They stop pushing, stop believing, stop showing up with the same intensity, because their nervous system gets tired of waiting. Waiting without reassurance, waiting without feedback, waiting without relief. That's the test. And here's the truth. Pressure isn't meant to be eliminated. It's meant to be normalized. That's the key. Elite performers don't live without pressure. They live with trained nervous systems. Their heart rate still rises. Their stomach still tightens. But they don't panic. They stay present. Calm is a weapon. So how do you train this? Practically, deliberately, mechanically. You stop running from discomfort. You stop trying to soothe it immediately. You breathe slower when your body wants to rush. You move deliberately when your mind wants to scatter. You stay in the moment when everything in you wants out. That's training, not affirmations, not hype. Exposure, controlled exposure to discomfort on purpose. You have a choice. You can keep numbing pressure with distraction, or you can let yourself feel it and stay. You have a choice. Every time you stay calm under stress, you send your nervous system a message. This is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. And that message changes everything. Over time, pressure loses its authority. It stops dictating your behavior. You stop mistaking intensity for urgency. That's the key. Calm is a weapon. Think about the moments you regret most. You spoke too quickly. You quit too early. You reacted instead of responding. Those moments didn't come from lack of intelligence. They came from nervous system overload. So discipline must include regulation. You don't rise to discipline and pressure. You fall to your level of nervous system training. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline includes learning how to slow yourself down. Here's a simple instruction. When pressure hits, do less, not more. Shorter movements, fewer words, slower breathing, silence instead of explanation, presence instead of reaction. That's how calm becomes a weapon. You don't need their permission, not to pause before responding, not to sit in discomfort, not to let silence do the work. People who rush under pressure expose themselves. People who stay calm gain leverage. That's the key. This chapter is not asking you to suppress emotion. It's asking you to contain it. Containment is strength. You feel everything, but you don't obey everything. You don't obey fear. You don't obey urgency. You don't obey discomfort. You acknowledge it. Then you act deliberately. Calm is a weapon. Say it again. Calm is a weapon. The more pressure you face without escaping, the stronger you become. Not emotionally louder, internally steadier. And that steadiness changes how people respond to you. They feel it in your voice, your posture, your pacing. Pressure no longer pulls you out of yourself. You stay centered. That's power. You have a choice. You can keep letting pressure decide who you are. Or you can decide who you are, regardless of pressure. You have a choice. This chapter changes how you see stress. Stress is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to slow down and stay precise. When things get heavy, you don't abandon discipline. You tighten it. You return to basics. Same habits. Same standards. Every day. That's how calm is built. Not by avoiding storms, but by standing inside them without collapsing. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline is calm under control. Let this settle. Pressure will come again. Publicly. Privately. Unexpectedly. But now you know the truth. Pressure doesn't require reaction. It requires regulation. Calm is a weapon. And when you're calm, you're dangerous, in the best way. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't rush. You choose. Deliberately. You've learned how to stay steady under pressure. Now it's time to learn what happens when discipline becomes non-negotiable. Chapter 8. Kill the need to be seen. Sit with this for a moment. The desire to be seen feels natural, human, almost innocent. You want effort to be noticed. You want struggle to be acknowledged. You want progress to be validated. But here's the quiet truth most people never face. Wanting recognition too early weakens your foundation. That's the key. This chapter is not about becoming invisible to the world. It's about becoming independent of the world's reaction. Because the moment your discipline depends on being seen, it stops being discipline. It becomes performance. And performance collapses the second no one is watching. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Say it slowly. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they leak energy trying to be witnessed. They post too soon. They talk too early. They explain their plans before they've built the structure. They want applause before proof. And that craving costs them everything. You have a choice. You can build quietly and feel lonely for a while. Or you can chase attention and stay fragile forever. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's talk about why the need to be seen is so dangerous. When you want recognition, you hand control to other people. Their approval becomes fuel. Their silence becomes sabotage. One compliment lifts you. One ignored effort deflates you. That's not strength. That's dependency. And discipline cannot grow in dependency. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Real discipline does not require witnesses. It requires standards. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Look at the strongest people you know. The calmest ones. The most grounded ones. They don't announce their process. They don't explain themselves. They don't rush to be understood. They move quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And when they show results, people call it sudden. But it wasn't sudden. It was silent. That's the key. Most people want credit for effort, but effort doesn't matter. Outcomes do. And outcomes are built when no one is clapping. You don't need their permission. Not to work quietly. Not to disappear for a while. Not to stop posting, explaining, or proving. You don't need their permission to build something real. This chapter asks you to let go of something uncomfortable. The urge to be validated mid-process. Because validation mid-process weakens focus. It splits your attention. Part of you works. Part of you waits to be seen working. And that division slows everything down. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Say it again. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Here's a hard truth. The more you talk about what you're doing, the less pressure you feel to actually do it. Words release tension. Silence builds it. Silence forces execution. That's the key. So what must you stop doing? Stop announcing plans. Stop posting discipline. Stop explaining growth. Stop checking who noticed. Stop measuring your progress by reactions. Because reactions are noise. Start doing this instead. Work without witnesses. Train without posting. Improve without updating anyone. Let results introduce you. That's discipline. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. This doesn't mean you never share. It means you share after the work is undeniable. After consistency is boring. After the identity is stable. Too many people want to be seen becoming strong. Few are willing to be unseen becoming disciplined. You have a choice. You can chase recognition and stay distracted. Or you can disappear long enough to become undeniable. You have a choice. Let's talk about social proof. Likes, comments, views, praise. They feel good. but they create a subtle addiction. You start working for the reward instead of the standard. And the day the reward doesn't come, motivation collapses. That's why discipline must be private first, built in isolation, strengthened without applause. Invisible work creates visible dominance. When no one is watching, you discover who you really are. Do you still show up? Do you still execute? Do you still care? That's where identity is formed. Not on display, but in silence. You don't need their permission. Not to be misunderstood. Not to be underestimated. Not to be forgotten for a while. Being underestimated is an advantage. It lowers interference. It gives you space. That's the key. This chapter is not about ego suppression. It's about ego containment. Your ego wants to be seen now. Your discipline wants to win later. You must decide which one leads. You have a choice. Here's a practical rule. If you feel the urge to post about effort, do the work again instead. If you feel the urge to explain your grind, add another hour of focus. If you feel the urge to prove something, build something. That's how craving turns into capacity. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Most people never experience this power because they leak it through visibility. They spend energy managing perception instead of sharpening ability. And perception doesn't protect you under pressure. Ability does. That's the key. Let silence become your ally. Silence sharpens focus. Silence removes comparison. Silence builds emotional self-sufficiency. When no one is watching, you stop acting. You start being. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline doesn't need an audience. This chapter changes how you see recognition. Recognition is not fuel. It's a byproduct. Chasing it too early poisons the process. So you stop chasing. You build. Quietly. Ruthlessly. Patiently. Invisible work creates visible dominance. Let that sink in. When results finally show, they don't need explanation. They speak. And when they speak, they silence doubt without effort. You don't need their permission. Not to be quiet. Not to be focused. Not to be patient. The strongest phase of your growth will feel lonely. That's normal. Loneliness is not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you're no longer performing. That's the key. Sit in it. Work through it. Let discipline replace the need to be seen. Because when you no longer need recognition, you become unstoppable. No one can manipulate you with approval. No one can slow you with silence. You act because it's who you are, not because someone is watching. Invisible work creates visible dominance. This is where real confidence is born. Not loud, not flashy, quiet, grounded, unshakable. You've killed the need to be seen. Now you're ready for the next shift. Because once attention no longer controls you, nothing external does. You've stopped chasing validation. Now it's time to learn how. Discipline becomes your identity. Chapter 9. Turn pain into precision. There is a moment in every life when pain stops being loud and starts being heavy. Not dramatic, not explosive, just there, sitting in the chest, in the stomach, behind the eyes. You know that pain. The disappointment you never fully processed. The rejection you didn't see coming. The regret that visits late at night. Most people try to escape it. They numb it. They distract from it. They drown in it. And that's where chaos begins. Pain without structure becomes chaos. Pain with discipline becomes power. That's the key. This chapter is not about avoiding pain. It's about using it. Use it. Don't drown in it. Say it quietly. Use it. Don't drown in it. Pain is not the enemy. Unfocused pain is. When pain has no direction, It leaks into everything. Your mood, your decisions, your relationships, your habits. You become reactive, inconsistent, confused. But when pain is given structure, it sharpens you. It narrows your focus. It strips away nonsense. It forces honesty. You have a choice. You can let pain scatter your energy, or you can let it concentrate it. You have a choice. That's the key. Most people think strong people don't feel deeply. That's wrong. Strong people feel everything. They just don't let feelings drive the car. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline is what turns pain into precision. Without discipline, pain becomes self-pity. With discipline, pain becomes fuel. Use it. Don't drown in it. Think about the last time something hurt you. Really hurt you. Your instinct may have been to talk about it endlessly. Replay it. Explain it. Seek comfort. That's human. But here's the truth. Talking without action keeps pain alive. Action transforms it. That's the key. Pain wants movement, not chaos, not distraction. Movement with direction. So what must you stop doing? Stop rehearsing the story. Stop feeding the wound with attention. Stop waiting to feel better before acting. Feeling better comes after movement, not before. You don't need their permission. Not to heal quietly. Not to process privately. Not to grow without explanation. You don't need their permission to be disciplined with your pain. Here's what you start doing instead. When pain hits, you narrow your focus. One task, one habit, one non-negotiable action. Pain gives you intensity. Discipline gives that intensity a job. That's precision. Use it. Don't drown in it. Let me say this clearly. Pain is energy. Unrefined. If you don't shape it, it shapes you. And it rarely shapes you gently. That's the key. This chapter changes how you relate to suffering. Pain is not something to get rid of quickly. It's something to convert properly. When pain shows up, ask one question. Where can I apply this? Not, why me? Not, how do I escape? Where can I apply this? To training, to work, to focus, to discipline. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Here's a practical structure. When you feel emotional pain, stop explaining it. Choose a physical or mental task. Execute it cleanly. Do not negotiate with emotion. That's it. Simple. Not easy. Simple. Use it. Don't drown in it. Most people let pain turn inward. They attack themselves. Self-blame. Self-doubt. Self-sabotage. That's wasted energy. Precision redirects energy outward into execution. You're not denying the pain. You're assigning it a purpose. That's the key. Pain handled correctly builds emotional resilience. You stop fearing discomfort because you know how to use it. You stop panicking when things hurt because you trust your structure. You don't need their permission. Not to be calm in pain. Not to be steady under pressure. Not to be quiet when others fall apart. This chapter is about mastery. Not over others. Over your inner weather. When pain comes, you don't collapse. You tighten your routine. Same habits. Same standards. You show up. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Let pain remind you what matters. It strips away distractions. It exposes false priorities. If you listen carefully, pain clarifies. But only if you're disciplined enough to hear it. Use it. Don't drown in it. Think of pain as a signal. A signal that something matters. A signal that growth is available. But growth is optional. Chaos is automatic. That's the key. You must choose structure. You must choose repetition. You must choose execution when emotion is loud. You have a choice. Every time pain arrives, You choose what it becomes. A breakdown or a breakthrough. You have a choice. Here's something most people never learn. Pain does not go away when ignored. It waits, and it returns stronger. But pain loses power when used daily. Converted into discipline. Converted into precision. Converted into identity. You stop asking, why does this keep happening? You start saying, good. I know what to do with this. That's strength. Quiet strength. This chapter is not telling you to harden your heart. It's teaching you to steady your hands. To work while hurting. To execute while emotional. To stay disciplined while uncomfortable. Use it. Don't drown in it. When pain becomes part of your system, nothing surprises you anymore. Rejection doesn't derail you. Failure doesn't define you. Uncertainty doesn't paralyze you. Because you know the process. Pain comes. You focus. You act. That's the key. You are no longer fragile. Not because you feel less, but because you waste nothing. Every emotion has a place. Every discomfort has a job. Every painful moment becomes precise. You don't need their permission. Not to transform silently. Not to rebuild steadily. Not to become dangerous through calm. You've learned to turn pain into precision. And when pain no longer controls you, nothing else can. You've stopped drowning in emotion. Now it's time to learn how. Consistency becomes identity. Chapter 10. Raise your standards without announcing it. There is a moment in growth that almost no one talks about. It's quiet, uncelebrated, invisible. It's the moment you decide that what used to be acceptable no longer is. No speech, no declaration, no announcement, just a shift, a private decision, made in silence. That's where real growth begins. Most people announce change because they're still negotiating with themselves. They talk before they transform, promise before they practice, declare before they discipline, and the announcement becomes the reward. That's the trap. Real growth happens quietly and shows up loudly later. No announcements, only upgrades. Say it calmly. No announcements, only upgrades. That's the key. When you raise your standards internally, your behavior changes automatically. You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't defend. You just move differently. You arrive earlier. You prepare more. You tolerate less nonsense. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you decided something. You have a choice. You can seek validation for who you're becoming, or you can build it quietly until it's undeniable. You have a choice. Most people tie their standards to mood. When they feel motivated, standards rise. When they feel tired, standards collapse. That's not a standard. That's emotion. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. A real standard doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't explain. It simply exists. And you either meet it, or you don't. That's the key. Raising your standards doesn't mean becoming harsh. It means becoming clear. Clear about what you allow. Clear about what you accept. Clear about what you walk away from. And clarity doesn't need an audience. No announcements. Only upgrades. Let's talk about what you must stop doing. Stop telling people what you're going to do. Stop posting intentions instead of results. Stop asking for permission to change. You don't need their permission. Not to wake up earlier. Not to work harder. Not to outgrow the room. You don't need their permission to expect more from yourself. Here's the truth most people resist. When you raise your standards, some people will feel uncomfortable. Not because you judged them, but because you reminded them. Your silence becomes a mirror. Your consistency becomes pressure. And they may question you. Why so serious? Why so distant? Why so disciplined? You don't answer. That's the discipline. No announcements. Only upgrades. When standards rise quietly, they rewire identity. You stop saying, "I'm trying to be better." You start acting like someone who doesn't tolerate less. That's the shift. It's subtle, but permanent. That's the key. Here's something practical. Pick 3 areas of your life. Just 3. Behavior. In each area, define one quiet upgrade. Not a goal. A standard. For example, I don't start my day without movement. I don't speak badly about myself. I don't submit work I wouldn't respect. You don't tell anyone. You just live it. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Standards don't shout. They show. When you raise your standards, your excuses disappear. Because excuses only survive where standards are low. High standards don't argue with excuses. They ignore them. That's the key. This chapter is about internal authority. About becoming someone who doesn't need motivation because their standards pull them forward. You don't wake up asking, "Do I feel like it?" You wake up knowing, "This is who I am." No announcements. Only upgrades. People who announce change are often still attached to the old version of themselves. They want applause for the intention to let go. But you've moved past that. You don't announce distance. You create it. You don't announce focus. You practice it. You don't announce discipline. You live it. You have a choice. You can keep explaining yourself, or you can let your standards speak. You have a choice. That's the key. Raising standards quietly also protects you. It keeps your energy intact. No debates. No defending boundaries. No emotional labor. You simply become unavailable for what no longer fits. Not angry. Not bitter. Unavailable. That's power. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Here's another truth. Standards compound. The first one feels uncomfortable. The second feels intentional. The third feels natural. Soon, you're no longer forcing discipline. You're maintaining identity. And identity doesn't need hype. It needs consistency. No announcements. Only upgrades. You'll notice something interesting. As your standards rise, your circle may change. Not because you cut people off aggressively, but because alignment changed. Your pace increased. Your tolerance decreased. Your silence deepened. That's not loss. That's refinement. You don't need their permission to outgrow familiarity. You don't need their permission to protect your standards. That's the key. This chapter is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming precise. Precise with time. Precise with energy. Precise with effort. When standards are clear, decision-making becomes simple. Yes or no. Stay or leave. Commit or decline. No drama. That's discipline. Let me ground this. Tomorrow, don't announce anything. Just do one thing better than the version of you from yesterday. Show up 5 minutes earlier. Prepare 10% more. Speak with intention. No posts. No promises. Only upgrades. You have a choice. Every day, you vote for who you are. With what you tolerate, raise the vote quietly. That's the key. When people finally notice, it will feel sudden to them. Overnight success. Sudden change. Unexpected discipline. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't sudden. It was silent. Built in moments no one saw. No announcements. Only upgrades. And when standards rise high enough, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't chase feelings. You honor commitments. You don't wait for confidence. You act with clarity. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. This chapter locks in something important. You are no longer becoming someone. You are maintaining standards. And standards don't beg. They don't explain. They don't announce. They simply exist. You've raised your standards quietly. Now it's time to learn how standards become non-negotiable. Chapter 11. Detach from the outcome. There is a quiet tension that lives inside most people. They work, but they're watching the scoreboard. They try, but they're measuring approval. They move forward, but their eyes are glued to the result. That tension is invisible, but it's exhausting. Attachment creates anxiety. Detachment creates consistency. That's the key. This chapter is about loosening your grip. Not on effort, not on discipline, on outcome. Say this calmly to yourself. Show up. Execute. Let results arrive. Show up. Execute. Let results arrive. When you attach yourself to outcomes, every delay feels personal. Every setback feels like failure. Every silence feels like rejection. And your nervous system never rests. You perform tense. You think rushed. You doubt mid-action. That's not weakness. That's attachment. You have a choice. You can chase results emotionally, or you can build results mechanically. You have a choice. That's the key. Detachment does not mean you don't care. It means you care correctly. You commit fully to the process and release control of the timeline. You give your best without demanding immediate proof. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline stays calm because it's anchored in action, not outcome. Most people quit, not because the work is too hard, but because the results are too slow. They expected applause. They got silence. They expected progress. They got resistance. And they took it personally. That's where consistency dies. Detachment keeps you alive in the work. Show up. Execute. Let results arrive. When you detach, your performance improves. But because pressure distorts judgment, detachment tightens the mind. Detachment frees it. You think clearer. You act cleaner. You recover faster. That's the key. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop checking results constantly. Stop refreshing metrics. Stop measuring your worth by feedback. Those habits train anxiety. Instead, start measuring inputs. Did you show up today? Did you execute cleanly? Did you honor your standard? That's it. Results are lagging indicators. Inputs are within your control. You don't need their permission to focus on the process. You don't need validation to stay disciplined. You don't need guarantees to do the work. That's maturity. Detachment is emotional adulthood. It's understanding that effort precedes evidence. Let me say that again. Effort precedes evidence. That's the key. Most people want reassurance first. Proof, validation, confirmation. But discipline moves without reassurance. It moves because it decided to. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. When you detach from outcomes, failure loses its sting. Success loses its intoxication. You stay level, and level people last longer. Show up. Execute. Let results arrive. This chapter rewires how you experience effort. You stop asking, "Is this working?" and start saying, "This is what I do." That shift changes everything. You no longer negotiate with uncertainty. You work inside it. Here's a practical practice. For the next 7 days, do the work. Do not check the result. Do not measure progress. Do not seek feedback. Just execute. Not forever. Just long enough to feel the difference. You'll notice something. Your mind quiets. Your body relaxes. Your focus sharpens. That's detachment at work. That's the key. Attachment ties your identity to something you can't fully control. Detachment anchors your identity to behavior you can repeat. That's why detachment builds confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't shake when things don't go your way. You don't need their permission to stop chasing reassurance. You don't need applause to stay consistent. You don't need outcomes to validate effort. Effort validates itself. Here's a truth few people accept. Results arrive when you stop begging for them, when you stop rushing them, when you stop hovering over them. They arrive as a byproduct of disciplined repetition. Show up, execute, let results arrive. Say it slowly. Show up, execute, let results arrive. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you relentless, because you're no longer distracted by emotional ups and downs. You become boringly consistent, and boring consistency beats emotional intensity every time. That's the key. This chapter is not asking you to lower your ambition. It's asking you to raise your patience. Ambition without patience creates burnout. Ambition with patience creates mastery. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Detachment also protects your joy. You stop postponing peace until some future achievement. You find calm inside execution itself. The work becomes enough. That's freedom. When outcomes finally arrive, they feel lighter because you didn't build your identity waiting for them. You built it doing the work, and that identity remains. Even if results fluctuate, you have a choice. Attach your emotions to results, or attach your identity to process. You have a choice. That's the key. This chapter locks something in. You are no longer outcome-driven. You are process-committed. You don't rush. You don't chase. You don't panic. You show up. You execute. And you trust time. Show up. Execute. Let results arrive. You've released the need to control the future. Now it's time to master how discipline survives boredom. Chapter 12. Return changed, not loud. There is a moment, after long discipline, when the world begins to notice again. Not because you announced anything, not because you demanded attention, but because something about you feels different, quieter, heavier, more settled. This chapter is about that moment. The return. Not the loud one. Not the dramatic one. The inevitable one. The greatest comeback doesn't seek revenge. It delivers inevitability. That's the key. Most people fantasize about their return. They imagine shock, reactions, apologies, regret on other people's faces. That fantasy keeps them emotionally tied to the past. But you're not here for revenge. You're here for control. Different energy. Same silence. Say it slowly. Different energy. Same silence. A real return doesn't explain itself. It doesn't justify. It doesn't confront. It doesn't prove. It simply arrives, complete. You have a choice. You can come back loud and hungry for validation, or you can come back calm and impossible to ignore. You have a choice. That's the key. When you've done the work properly, you don't need a speech. Your presence speaks. Your pace speaks. Your restraint speaks. Your standards speak. And the most unsettling thing for others is not your success. It's your composure. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline changes your nervous system. You don't rush anymore. You don't overreact. You don't explain. You move like someone who knows exactly who they are. Different energy. Same silence. This chapter prepares you for the psychological moment of return. Because here's the truth. Coming back changed. can feel uncomfortable. People expect the old version of you. The one who over-explained. The one who chased approval. The one who reacted emotionally. And when they don't get that version, they may test you. They may provoke. They may minimize. They may pretend nothing changed. You don't respond. That's discipline. You don't need their permission to be different now. You don't need acknowledgement to maintain your standards. You don't need closure to move forward. That's the key. A quiet return protects your power. Loud returns invite opinions. Quiet returns command respect. Not instantly. Eventually. Because consistency always reveals itself. Different energy. Same silence. Let's talk about what you must stop doing. Stop rehearsing your comeback story. Stop imagining reactions. Stop measuring your growth by recognition. Those habits pull you backward. Instead, start anchoring in behavior. How you enter rooms. How you speak or don't. How you handle pressure. That's where the return lives. It's not about a moment. It's about a manner. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Here's something subtle but important. When you return changed, some people will feel uneasy. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you're calm. Forces comparison. Your silence removes excuses. Your steadiness exposes chaos. You let that happen. You don't soften yourself to make others comfortable. You don't sharpen yourself to intimidate. You simply remain consistent. Different energy. Same silence. That's the key. A disciplined return is boring to explain and powerful to witness. No speeches. No declarations. No social proof. Just presence. Just execution. Just standards maintained under observation. You have a choice. You can perform your growth, or you can embody it. You have a choice. When people ask what changed, you don't over-answer. You don't give them a monologue. You might say less than before. That's not arrogance. That's integration. Growth that needs explanation hasn't fully settled yet. Growth that's real has weight. It slows you down. It makes you economical with words. Different energy. Same silence. This chapter also prepares you for a strange feeling. After all that work, you may expect to feel triumphant, but what you'll likely feel instead is calm. No rush. No high. Just clarity. That's how you know it's real. Hype fades. Calm remains. That's the key. The disciplined return doesn't look like revenge. It looks like inevitability. People don't ask, how did this happen? They think, of course. Of course they made it. Of course they changed. Of course they're different now. That's power. It's not about the flaw. It's about discipline. Let me ground this practically. When you return to environments where you were once underestimated, keep your routines unchanged. Keep your boundaries firm. Keep your reactions minimal. Do not accelerate. Do not slow down. Maintain pace. Consistency is louder than intensity. Different energy. Same silence. You don't need their permission to take up space calmly. You don't need validation to remain composed. You don't need acknowledgement to know who you are now. That's the final maturation. This chapter closes a loop. You left to rebuild. You stayed silent to grow. You disciplined your mind and body. Now you return, not to announce, to exist, to operate, to continue. The return is not an ending. It's a new baseline. That's the key. You are no longer chasing change. You are protecting identity. And identity doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It doesn't explain. It just shows up unchanged by opinion. Different energy. Same silence. This is the final lock. You don't need revenge. You don't need applause. You don't need closure. You needed discipline. And you built it. You've stopped fighting the past. You've stopped explaining the present. Now you move forward. With inevitability. Quiet. Unavoidable. This is not the end. This is who you are now. And the world will adjust. In silence. They counted you out. And for a moment, you believed them. Not because you were finished, but because you were tired of explaining yourself to people who never really understood you anyway. This audiobook was never about proving them wrong. It was about rebuilding trust with yourself, about showing up when no one is watching, and keeping promises that don't earn applause. A comeback doesn't happen all at once. It's built slowly in ordinary days, by standards you refuse to lower, even when quitting would be easier. From here on, you move quietly. No announcements. No justifications. Just steady progress, day after day. If this audiobook gave you clarity, if it reminded you who you're capable of becoming, pause for a moment before you leave. Subscribe to the StarBeam audiobook channel for more long-form audiobooks like this. Press like so this message reaches someone who needs it. And leave one word in the comments. Comeback. Not for me, but as a promise to yourself. Then close this video. Go do the work. They counted you out. Let them discover the truth later. In silence.